verify the statements of polls, the 879 statements of polls from Region 4 in the presence of party agents and local and foreign observers. So at the moment, we are standing by to try to talk to some of the attorneys in the case. So, as you can tell, the reporters are rushing Mr. Mendez, who represented the appellant in the case. He is not going to give a comment at this point in time. We talked to Mr. Anil Nandlal from the also one of the lawyers in the appellant's case.
By Mr. Boston cannot stand. We argued this identical issue in 2001 when Joe Hamilton, a central executive member of the PNC at that time, approached the court to get this very order, the verification done. And Chief Justice Barnard ordered the verification. The argument then that we advanced is the very argument that they are advancing now. I appeared in that case, Mr. Ford was in that case, Mr. Williams, Bassey Williams was in that case. We argued that they can only come by elections petition. And Ms. Desiree Barnard said we were wrong. And she distinguished it, and that's the very case that Mr. Mendez relied on. That case clarifies the issues. It tells you what type of issues you have to bring by elections petition, and it tells you what type of issues you must not bring by elections petition. It's not everything. Remember when I challenged the election of Keith Scott and Winston Felix in the National Assembly? They argued that I should only come by way of elections petition, and they were wrong. The Chief Justice Chang then ruled that they were wrong, and the Court of Appeal a few weeks ago ruled that they were wrong. So you got to read the Constitution properly and understand what it says. There are certain category of cases that can only be brought by election petition, and then there are other matters related to elections, but is not necessarily caught by that constitutional provision. For example, Ventos in Barbados. Mr. Professor Ventos, the chief elections officer in Barbados, during the election period, refused to register him as an elector to vote at the major elections. And that was part of an omission of an act during an electoral process, because election begins from proclamation until declaration of results. And it was during that very period. The case was heard 2 weeks, I believe, by the CCJ before the Barbadian elections date. And Ventos won his case. The chief elections officer was ordered to register Ventos and to allow him to vote. And it had nothing to do with elections petition. They did not bring it by way of election petition. If their argument was to succeed, and if they're correct, then Ventos would have lost his right to vote, and then what would he have done by utilizing an elections petition? He would have already lost his right to vote. An election petition can't get him to vote again at that elections. The point I am making is that we have to read the law. The law is organic. It's not something that exists in a book. It's a living thing. The law is very logical. And once you read the law and apply it logically to situations, we would not get into problems.
What do you say to a nation that still waits an election result?
I say that the chairperson, Justice Claudette Singh, and the chief elections officer are responsible for the state that we are in. They are responsible for the chaos going on out there. They are responsible for the tensions that are so high in this society. And the governing party is also responsible because they are obstructing the electoral process from being completed. The whole world knows. I don't have to take a position. It's not because I'm in the opposition I take this position. Objective people right across the region and across the world have taken the position that the electoral process was aborted and must be resumed and be completed.
And what will the judge be doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow the judge will be ruling on this preliminary point. But there is not much beyond this. The preliminary point is that this court has no jurisdiction. Hopefully, Her Honor rules that the court has jurisdiction following Chief Justice Desiree Bernard, and then makes the order that we are asking for. Simple order. An order directing that the process be complied with, and an order restraining the declaration of the results until the process is complied with. That's all we are seeking. Nothing exorbitant.
To make the executive order is absolute. That's what you're saying?
No, well, just no, to make the injunctions that were granted permanent.
Thank you. Thank you.
We
Earlier, there was clear authority in Guyana for this to be done. We didn't require an elections petition. And we've now raised those cases. It's clear authority that this doesn't interfere with the election. This is about someone doing their job, who they're not doing their job.
Thank you.
We're reporting live from the High Court in downtown Georgetown, where Chief Justice Roxanne George Wiltshire has said she will rule tomorrow on whether she has jurisdiction to listen to this case, which is for due process to be followed, as claimed by the appellant. The appellant has come to the court to say that the process for the conduct of elections in Region 4, rather the verification process for the statements of polls for Region number 4 were not followed to the end, and so there can be no declaration of the votes cast in those elections, and therefore there can be no declaration of the overall results of these elections by the Guyana Elections Commission unless the process is followed in law for the verification of the statements of polls in that region. The crowded media team you're seeing at the back are talking with Mr. Neil Boston. Today he said that he represents the returning officer for Region 4, Mr. Claremont Mingo, the Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, and the Guyana Elections Commission. Curious enough, Mr. Sis Gunraj, a commissioner for the Guyana Elections Commission, wrote on his Facebook page that there has been no recent meeting of the Elections Commission since these elections, which were held last Monday, and so he has no idea of how Mr. Boston is representing the commission. But Mr. Boston did tell the court this morning that he is representing those three parties: the returning officer, the CEO, and the Elections Commission. His argument is that the issues which have been brought to this High Court are not matters that could be dealt with by the Chief Justice at this time, because any questions regarding the elections and their validity has to do with an elections petition, and any challenge must come that way. However, the attorneys for the appellant are arguing that that is simply not the case, that you cannot allow an illegality to take place and go ahead and declare results of these elections and have a government in place and then challenge the petition of the court. So the attorney for the returning officer there, Mr. Neil Boston, leaving the High Court at this time. So just to wrap up at this time, the Chief Justice Roxanne George Wiltshire will rule tomorrow, Sunday, at 1:30 on whether she will go ahead and listen to this case that could lead to an injunction that will block the declaration of results for the March 2nd elections until the returning officer for Region number 4 carries through with what is laid down in law for the verification of statements of polls in the various regions. According to the law, the returning officer has to tabulate those statements of polls in the presence of various persons, which include party agents and any other persons. As we have been saying, in the other regions, regions 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, all of the returning officers in those regions have verified the statements of polls for their regions in the presence of party agents and local and international observers. So the appellant has moved to the court to have that same process followed in region number 4. They are arguing, the appellant is arguing that this has nothing to do with the elections results. Whatever the elections results is, this case is not concerned with it. This case concerns the purity and transparency of the process of verifying the statements of polls for the 879 polling stations where voters in region number 4 cast their ballots on March 2nd. Reporting for the newsroom, I'm Neil Marks from the High Court in Georgetown.